may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, my dudes, let's go through and let's do something we never really do, and that is talk about some offensive line play. And more specifically, let's talk about some offensive lines that should be drastically better than where they were last season based on the investments made by these teams in the offseason. And now, I am going to be the first person to admit that I am not an offensive line expert. I think if you pull up a YouTube video, if you pull up a fantasy football podcast, and you have some guy, some Joe Schmo trying to grind the all 22 tape, trying to give you his own grades and what offensive lines are actually superior to others, I mean, I think that analysis is going to be pretty bad the majority of the time. Now, I'll say, of course, there is a ton that goes behind offensive line grades, and that's why you have multiple people on every single staff that are getting paid six-figure salaries just to focus in on the offensive line. And that's their only job because there are so many moving variables. You really have to be specialized in that one area of the game to have a great comprehension of it. So instead of me trying to pretend like we grinded some all 22 tape and we know what we're talking about here, instead, what we can actually do is a lot more useful than that and a lot more, I want to say, better analysis. And that is look at what the teams did during the offseason and the investment that they made into the offensive line with the resources in money through free agency, trades during the offseason, as well as draft picks at the very top of the 2021 NFL draft. And I think that's going to give us a great baseline on where we can expect these offensive lines to be improving in 2021. And of course, offensive line play dictates so much about the offense, specifically their running back and what you're going to be expecting from a run efficiency standpoint. So yeah, this is going to be very useful for fantasy football. And yeah, guys, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I mean, I thought everybody watching these videos was subscribed, but somehow we are getting 100 subscribers a day, which is crazy. So thank you for that, my dudes. And let's dive into our number one most improved offensive line this offseason, and that is the Los Angeles Chargers. Okay, so here with the Chargers, I mean, they started off strong in free agency with where they actually went and spent resources. They bring in Corey Lindsey from the Packers, who is a center, and they decided to pay him. Keep in mind, we're only going to be looking at guaranteed money because one bad thing that a lot of people don't understand in the NFL is this is not Major League Baseball. This is not National League Basketball. No, this is a league where contracts are not guaranteed. The majority of the time, if you hear player X signed a $68 million contract, well, there's only going to be about $20 million guaranteed there. All that's going to be backloaded, and it's essentially just a $20 million contract that the numbers make it look a little funky. So no, we're just going to be looking at guaranteed money on the deal and trying to determine where those resources are actually going. And here with Corey Lindsey, the Chargers give him $17 million guaranteed, which makes him one of the highest paid centers in the NFL. And obviously that's going to bolster the interior offensive line for them. And they go out and they sign the right tackle for the Pittsburgh Steelers in Matt Feeler. And no, they didn't sign him for elite right tackle money because we have to understand that these tackles are going to be getting paid more than guards and centers. That's just the nature of the position. But they still give him $13 million guaranteed. He's only 29 years old. That is definitely going to be significant. And not only do they go out there and just spend, a ton of money. They spend $30 million guaranteed, bringing in a center and a right tackle. Once we get to the NFL draft, nobody was really expecting them to go offensive line just because who was projected at their pick. But all of a sudden, Rashawn Slater actually falls to the 13th pick overall. And the Chargers are in a situation where all of a sudden, they get one of, if not, I want to say the best offensive tackle in the NFL draft. Obviously, Penei Sewell was the majority of analysts' number one offensive tackle, but some people had Slater coming out of Northwestern right there. So you could make the argument that they come away with an elite offensive tackle in the draft after allocating so many resources to this offensive line during free agency. And you're looking at this team having a second-year quarterback. This is exactly what you need to do for him. Austin Eckler, a running back that we have already established, has been consistently a top 10 running back every single season with a much worse situation than this, with a much worse offensive line, a much worse quarterback. And all of a sudden, Austin Eckler, you're getting a slight discount if you can get him at the beginning of the second round in drafts this year. So this is massive for this entire offense. I think this is how you see the Chargers not take a step back. I mean, this is how you see them continue to progress forward. So you love this for Justin Herbert. You love this for Austin Eckler. I don't want to say it helps Keenan Allen that much. Someone it may actually help a lot is Mike Williams, because we know Mike Williams is that wide receiver with an incredibly high average depth of target. I mean, he has been one of the highest wide receivers in average depth of target over the past few years now. And this is going to give him more time to get downfield, more time to get those deep balls. So now our second team in terms of improving their offensive line this offseason is going to be the team that I don't want to say got embarrassed during the Super Bowl with their offensive line play, but it definitely wasn't great. And that is the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, so here with the Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, they attack this every which way. They go out of their way and they sign Joe Thuney from New England, who played 97% of the snaps for them last year at left guard. And they give him a monstrous contract, especially for a guard. Like I said, those guards are going to be getting paid less than offensive tackles. That's how the NFL works. They go out there and they sign him for $32 million guaranteed. That is massive. He's only 29 years old. I mean, this is making him one of the highest paid offensive guards in the NFL. This should be significant in securing the interior offensive line. Now, they also go out there and for the interior offensive line, they draft Creed Humphrey with their 31st pick in the second round. But more importantly, I mean, this team goes out and they trade for Orlando Brown. Orlando Brown, one of the best tackles. You can't necessarily look at his contract to understand how talented he is because he's still on that rookie deal. I'm sure that after trading a first-round pick for him, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be giving him a massive extension. So all of a sudden, they beef up their left tackle with Orlando Brown. They beef up their left guard with Joe Thuney from New England. And this is an offensive line that is completely revamped. Now, not even to mention that they convinced Kyle Long to come out of retirement, and we don't necessarily know right now if Kyle Long is going to be this team's starting right tackle yet. I mean, that's going to be more so a competition there, but beyond that, I mean, you're looking at this team that went out of their way. Obviously, they saw it being a problem in the Super Bowl. They addressed it every single spot. This offensive line pretty much hasn't upgraded. And we know what happens if you just upgrade the top 3 spots on your offensive line while you retain that depth. I mean, it slides down everybody in the pecking order of the responsibilities that they have. And Kansas City should go from a team that had a very bad offensive line at the end of last year, especially after the Eric Fisher injury. And all of a sudden, they can potentially be a top 10 unit. So you have to be excited about most particular Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now with CEH, the reason I'm saying that this is going to give him a massive boost is this is a running back that was drafted in the first round last year. We saw that this team wanted to get him utilized in the red zone. One horrible thing that I hear over and over and over again in the comment section on YouTube is people saying, well, Mason, the Kansas City Chiefs aren't going to run enough. They just throw. I mean, they can't support a running back one in fantasy. And no, that's just not true at all. I mean, you actually look, the Kansas City Chiefs were about in the middle of the NFL last year in their rush attempts. And what you would have to really be worried about is if the Chiefs, I mean, they were just incredibly aggressive passing the ball inside the 5-yard line. I mean, you really don't want to be playing for a team if you're a running back that's not going to be calling running plays once you get down to the goal line. But no, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, while he didn't capitalize that much on goal line usage last year, we know that the running back is not that important at the goal line. What is 99% of the impact play there is actually going to be the offensive line. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire has elite touchdown potential with this improved offensive line, knowing that he is going to be the guy getting the usage at the goal line. So you have to be excited about CEH. Obviously, I mean, this entire offense is great with Patrick Mahomes leading it to most likely being the highest scoring offense in the NFL. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire in particular, I think is going to get the bump up from this. So now, I don't want to say an under the radar upgrade, but an upgrade that I know a lot of people aren't necessarily behind right now. It's going to be the Cincinnati Bengals. And the big thing with the Bengals here is I understand, I mean, they don't go out there, they don't draft Penny Sewell in the first round, and that's really killing everybody's excitement about this improvement for the offensive line. But a big thing is they go out, they sign Riley Reef from Minnesota, they bring him in, give him $5.5 million guaranteed. Now, this is a player that at left tackle played 92% of the snaps for the Vikings last year. Now, I won't say that he's a long-term answer for them because clearly, I mean, at 33 years old, this is more so just a stopgap piece. I understand that offensive linemen, they can play longer than running backs, they can play longer than wide receivers, but at the same time, we're just talking 2021 here. So if he can come in, he can add some depth to this team. That's going to be very impactful. And if you listen to a lot of Bengals analysis, a major problem of their offensive line last year was actually not at the tackle position. It was more so on the inside. And while they did pass on Penei Sewell, which obviously is not ideal from the NFL draft if you're talking about just improving the offensive line, instead, they go out and they draft Jackson Carman in the second round with the 14th pick, a guard out of Clemson that should be able to come in and immediately play based on the reports that I read. Keep in mind, I am not trying to act like we are some expert analysis in evaluating offensive guard talent, but we can see the investment. We can see that he went in the middle of the second round. That has to say something. So here, I want to say that the Bengals, while obviously they could have improved it even more, they are still having to make this list based on what they did. Okay, so now let's go to our next team here, and this is going to be the Minnesota Vikings. And now the Vikings, they really didn't do anything in terms of shoring up this offensive line during free agency, but they went out there and during the draft, they took Christian Darrisaw with the 23rd pick out of Virginia Tech. I mean, that's going to be an offensive tackle that a lot of people thought was by far and away the best value on the board. I mean, you just hear reports based on that pick, and pretty much everybody was screaming that that was a sliding player that they were able to get in the late first. And they also get Wyatt Davis in the third round as well. So a guard coming in, and they essentially kind of beef up this offensive line with both top end talent at the tackle position and also some guard play that should be able to mix in. I don't think that he is going to be playing 80% of the snaps, but we know that offensive line, a big thing is having that depth because you are going to see so many injuries. And that's a big problem with what we saw with the Kansas City Chiefs last year. Is by the time they got to the Super Bowl, I mean, they were impacted on a multitude of levels, and that was mainly because Eric Fisher going down kind of slides the responsibility up for everybody, and it just makes it so much harder when you lose that cornerstone asset if you don't have that depth. Okay, so now our next one is going to be the Detroit Lions, who I am sure they had no intentions of being able to draft Penei Sewell with the 7th pick overall. I mean, pretty much everyone's offensive tackle won in this draft class. Now, some people did have the offensive tackle out of Northwestern a little bit higher, but I mean, 90% of people had Sewell as that elite guy that can anchor down a team's offensive line for the foreseeable future. And what's also very significant here is they go out of their way, and this is more so for the future, and they give Frank Ragnow pretty much the best contract that you have ever seen from someone playing the center position. You can make the argument that he is one of, if not the best centers in the NFL. They give him $28 million guaranteed. And all of a sudden, they have two elite players on this offensive line. I love how Detroit's building this, where they're going through and they're going, okay, obviously we're punting this upcoming season. We're a rebuilding team. We're probably not going to be competitive. We're not going to get our franchise quarterback until 2022. So let's just beef up this offensive line right now. Let's make sure when we get that franchise quarterback that him and DeAndre Swift have a ton of time to operate, that our run efficiency can be up, and it's going to ease our rookie quarterback in 2022. So I know that this doesn't necessarily apply that much for this year because they don't go out of their way and they don't sign a bunch of old veterans, but they also don't really lose that many players. So I think just adding the top talent on the offensive line from this NFL draft, I mean, is going to be significant for the Lions. Okay, so now our next team is going to be the New York Jets. And here with the Jets, they miss out on bringing back their left guard this past year who goes to Carolina. And what's surprising is he gets $6 million from Carolina, but if you actually look at the amount of snaps that he played last year, he only played 42% of the snaps, so that's not going to be as big of a deal for me as what we had with Morgan Moses coming over from Washington, who gets paid $3.1 million. He played 98% of the snaps last year. And also they signed the guard Dan Freeney from the Los Angeles Chargers. They bring him over. He played 100% of the snaps last year, only 27 years old. They're signing him for $3 million as well. So they kind of just go through, they put a hole at their left guard spot that they had from free agency. They bring in a tackle that should definitely be able to help with his depth. I don't necessarily think that he projects to be a starter right away, but a big thing is they go out and they trade up to draft Elijah Vera Tucker. And we know that that is a massive pick in that he was by far and away the best guard in this past year's NFL draft. And like we have said so many times before, in today's age in the NFL, I mean, offensive tackle play is so much more important for an offense than what you're having with guards. So you look through and you actually see season to season, there are a significant amount of tackles that go in the first round of the NFL draft every year, because you can make the argument that beyond quarterback, it's potentially the most important position on the field. But guards in today's age, when teams are focusing more so in on the pass, they're not necessarily valued as highly. So him going with the 14th pick overall here, I just want to say that's in the same range of Penei Sewell going with the 7th pick overall, in terms of you're just seeing that team go out of their way and showing you that this player is an elite talent. It's kind of like saying that you have two guys going in the top 10 in the NFL draft, one at the running back position, one at the wide receiver position. What's more impressive in terms of their prospect profile and trying to understand what kind of prospect they are for their respective position? It's definitely the running back, because that's the position the NFL values slightly less compared to wide receiver. So it's kind of the same thing here with guards versus tackles. Elijah Vera Tucker, I mean, that is significant team investment for a guard. Okay, so now our next team we are going to be bringing up is going to be the Washington football team. Y'all know I've been giving so much crap to Washington as of late, saying that Terry McLaurin is, I don't even want to say I've been giving crap to Washington, actually. That's probably a poor choice of words. I've been saying that Terry McLaurin is an overrated asset, and I've been saying I want to invest in Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas, I want Antonio Gibson. But regardless, let's move on past that, because I know so many people are going to be giving me hate. And the big thing we want to look at is the fact that they bring in Eric Flowers from Miami through trade. This is a left guard that's getting paid $20 million guaranteed. And on top of this, with their right guard in Brandon Sheriff, they go out and they actually franchise tag him for $18 million. So that is exactly what you're wanting to see in terms of a team going out there, investing into their offensive line. And then at the same time, they decide to draft Sam Cosmi, a great player out of Texas. And I will say that I have actually worked out in the rec with him at the same time. No, of course, I did not talk to him. My friends tried to convince me to ask him for an interview on the flock, and this is before we got any views whatsoever. We were literally getting maybe like 30 views a video. So I was like, you know what, guys? No. And I was just a little small child that was terrified to talk to a grown-ass man. So I wish we would have done that. But anyway, going over to Washington in the second round, a lot of people had him graded out higher than that. So anyway you cut it, this is another team that went out there, significantly invested into their offensive line. And that's what we want to see, because, I mean, we have been all aboard. We've been driving the train, just saying Antonio Gibson has league-winning potential. And seeing that they go and they invest into their offensive line, obviously that's massive. Obviously you love to see it. And I just really like what it means for Antonio Gibson this upcoming season. So some other notable teams that I'm not really going to dive in too much with are going to be the Seattle Seahawks, who didn't make that many moves. They do sign Gabe Jackson from the Raiders, a right guard that played 98% of the snaps for the Raiders last year. They give him $10 million guaranteed. But actually, let's just cut it there. And we're definitely going to be making a video talking about some of the offensive lines that have seen massive downgrades. I mean, look at New York, look at New England. I mean, there are going to be teams that we are talking about. But of course, guys, please go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton. And we are continuing to grow at a rapid rate, something that I honestly can't even believe. And I mean, we are going to be in our new studio very soon. And maybe you're watching this by the time we're already in our new studio, if you're watching this video like a week late. So yeah, I mean, go look at some new videos on the channel. Let me know what you think. And yeah, that should be it, guys. Have a great day. We've gotten a ton of new members joining the flock. Thank you, Grind for Gold, Devin, Bungified, Brian, Brody, Victor, Chris, Grant, Trevor, and David. Thank you, my dudes.